You want to be a better bass player? What I'm about to show you is absolutely going to help you do that big time. Hi, I'm John Leapman. You ever record yourself practicing the bass or just playing the bass? I guess the real question is, are you brave enough to listen back to yourself on that recording and hear what you really sound like? You know, chances are you might hear some things that you don't want to hear. I mean, sure, you'll hear everything that you meant to play, but you might also hear some things that you didn't mean to play. Things like extraneous noise, string ring. Well, there's a way to combat that, and there's some things that you can and should do, and I'm going to show you those right now. One of them is by using your fretting hand, which is probably your left hand, and the other is by using certain techniques on your plucking hand, which is probably your right hand. Let's start with the left hand, the fretting hand. And I'm going to assume you're playing this on a 4-string bass, but these techniques will apply to 5- and 6-string and however many stringed basses. But let's start with the 4. Say you're playing a note on the E string. The only note we want to hear is the note on the E string. So we want to make sure that we're blocking the other 3 strings, the A, the D, and the G. And we do that with the rest of our finger that's not holding down the note on the E string. So we're ever so slightly touching the other 3 strings so they're not ringing. And it doesn't matter which finger you use. I'm using my first finger here. If you're using your second finger, third finger, your pinky, you're still going to find a way to mute those other 3 strings. Remember, the only note we want to hear is the note we want to hear. So on the E string, you're playing the E and you're muting the other 3 strings with the rest of your hand. Similarly, on the A string, we don't have to worry too much about muting the E string when we play on the A string, because as soon as we pluck that note, what happens to our finger? It immediately, whether we want it to or not, immediately moves against the E string and mutes that. So the other muting that we just talked about a minute ago, handled by the rest of your hand, only has to deal with the other 2 strings, the D and the G. See what I'm saying? Let's move up one more to the D string. We're playing the D, so we want to hear that, and we're muting the G string with the rest of our finger. And I found that my thumb just kind of naturally goes underneath the E string when I'm playing on anything other than the E string. So that is taken care of. And similarly to when I said when you play on the A, you're automatically muting the E. Well, when you're playing on the D string, you're automatically muting the A string right here. See? And now when we're playing the G string, there's nothing else we can mute with our fretting hand because it's down here and the other strings are up here. So the rest of that muting has to be taken care of by the plucking hand, probably your right hand. But first, let's just take one more quick look at what we just said. On the E string, you're holding down the note on the E, and you're muting the other 3 strings by hovering ever so slightly over the A, D, and G strings so they are kind of choked off from ringing out. On the A string, similar, but we only have to choke off the D and the G strings. And the E string we're muting either by your thumb and or your finger that's plucking on the A string. Move up to the D string. The G string is muted by our finger, whichever finger we're using to play on the D string. And the A string is muted by hitting it when we strike the D. And the E is, the way I do it, I have my thumb behind the E string, which just happens very naturally for me. And then the G string, really not much to worry about with the left hand, with the fretting hand, because Like we said, there's no other way to mute the other strings because our hands just aren't built that way. So let's take a look at the plucking hand right now. When we're playing on the E string, nothing really we can do to mute, no reason we have to mute anything there because, like we said, we're already muting the other 3 strings with the rest of our fretting hand. When we play on the A string, still handled, the muting is still pretty much handled by the left hand, the fretting hand. When we move up to the D string, still very similar, very light duty on the muting as far as muting goes with the right hand. But now when we get to the G string, the G we're playing, so obviously we don't want to mute that. The D is going to be muted by the plucking of the G string because it moves right down to the D string and it blocks it there. The E string, like I said, my thumb just naturally goes behind the E string, so that's muted. But we still have the A string exposed, and we don't want to hear that or any of the other strings when we're plucking on the G string. So here's what you need to do. This might feel a little awkward at first, but keep doing it. It'll eventually become second nature. Look at my thumb here, my right thumb. Like I said, it's normally behind the E string, but when I move up to the G string, it just naturally sits here between the E and the A strings, muting both of those. The D is muted when we pluck the G string, and the G we don't want to mute because that's the string we're playing on. So the tricky part is moving it up and down. For example, watch my right thumb. Notice how it's moving up in between the E and the A when I'm playing on the G, and then I move it back down when I'm playing on any of the lower strings. And you see what that does? That mutes the unwanted strings, or the for now unwanted strings, so the only note we're hearing is the note we want to hear. Give it a try. Let me know your experience. Like I said, it might feel, or probably will feel, a little awkward at first, moving your thumb up and down like this. And on the left hand, the fretting hand, try that muting. You may or may not already be kind of doing it, but be conscious of it and concentrate. Try recording yourself. See if you're only hearing the notes that we want to hear, that you want to hear when you're practicing. And I'm telling you, I've done this thousands and thousands of times with my recordings for all my books and all my online resources. When you really listen, at first I'm saying, wow, am I playing all that? The more you do it, the more you'll pinpoint and identify what you need to work on, and you can mark your progress. Again, try it. Let me know. If you have any questions, hit me up. I love helping bass players. I've got all kinds of tips and advice for learning bass, so be sure to subscribe to this channel. I will see you right here, same time, same place, next week. In the meantime, I'm John Liebman. Let's play bass.